Do you like reading stories?
I absolutely do enjoy reading stories, especially fiction novels. I find that immersing myself in different narratives and characters is a great way to relax and escape from my daily routine. A well-written story can be both entertaining and quite thought-provoking, which I really appreciate.
What kind of stories did you like when you were a child?
When I was a child, I was mostly fascinated by fairy tales and adventure stories. I loved anything that involved magical creatures, faraway lands, and brave heroes overcoming obstacles. Those imaginative stories really capture my attention and encourage me to start reading quite early.
Do you think it's important to tell children stories?
Yes, I believe it's incredibly important to tell children's stories. It not only helps to develop their language skills and vocabulary, but also sparks their creativity and imagination. Furthermore, stories often convey valuable moral lessons about life and social behavior in an engaging way.
Do you enjoy watching movies based on stories?
I generally prefer reading the book first, but I do enjoy watching film adaptations. It's interesting to see how a director interprets the characters and setting that I imagine while reading. However, I often find that the movie version misses some of the depth that the original story offered.
What is the most famous story from your country?
I would say one of the most famous stories from my country is the epic tale of the Ramayana. It's a very long narrative about duty and morality, featuring gods and heroes. Although it's an ancient story, its themes of good versus evil and loyalty remain incredibly relevant today, which is why everyone knows it. I'd like to describe one of the most enduring and important traditional stories from India, the ancient epic known as the Ramayana. I first became familiar with the Ramayana during my early childhood, probably around the age of 5 or 6. It's not a story you learn just once. It's woven into the cultural fabric, so I encountered it through multiple sources. My earliest exposure came from my grandmother, who would tell us simplified versions of the stories at bedtime. Her narration was always vivid and full of drama, making the characters feel incredibly real to a young mind. As I grew older, I knew the story in greater depth through illustrated books, popular television adaptations, and attending community festivals where parts of the epic were often performed as plays. It's truly a narrative that is constantly retold and celebrated across the country, so you absorb it over many years. The Ramayana is essentially the story of Prince Rama, an incarnation of the god Vishnu, and his wife Sita. The central plot follows Rama's unjust exile from his kingdom, the subsequent kidnapping of Sita by the demon king Ravana, and Rama's epic journey with his brother Lakshmana and the monkey general Hanuman to rescue her. It culminates in a great battle and their triumphant return. The reason I particularly like this story, even as an adult, is its profound exploration of dharma, a concept often translated as righteousness or duty. It's not just an adventure tale. It sets a perfect moral standard for every relationship: a son's duty to his father, a husband's devotion to his wife, and a king's responsibility to his people. The characters are complex, demonstrating both superhuman strength and very human flaws. For instance, Rama's decision to follow his father's vow, even to his own detriment, teaches selflessness, while the loyalty shown by Hanuman represents pure devotion. These ethical lessons are timeless and provide a powerful cultural reference point for morality, making the Ramayana far more than just an old tale. It's a foundational text for life's principles.
How do traditional historical stories influence a sense of patriotism in young people?
Traditional historical stories play a crucial role in shaping a young person's sense of patriotism by connecting them to a collective past and shared identity. These narratives, often focusing on national heroes, pivotal wars, or founders of a nation, provide tangible examples of sacrifice, courage, and dedication to the common good. When young people read about or watch dramatizations of these events, they begin to internalize a narrative of national resilience and exceptionalism. This process fosters emotional attachment, moving abstract concepts of country and duty into relatable human experiences. Consequently, these stories don't just teach history. They cultivate pride and a moral obligation to uphold the values and freedoms that previous generations supposedly fought for. However, there is a risk that these stories are often simplified or romanticized, which can lead to a less nuanced or even an overly nationalistic view of history.
In what ways has globalization and the internet changed how national history and patriotic ideals are communicated?
Globalization and the internet have fundamentally altered the landscape of how national history and patriotic ideals are communicated, presenting both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, the internet bypasses traditional state-controlled curricula and media, allowing citizens to access diverse, critical, and often transnational perspectives on their own history. This access can challenge official narratives and lead to a more skeptical, less fervent form of patriotism. On the other hand, the internet also enables extremely efficient, targeted dissemination of nationalistic content through social media and digital platforms. This rapid, emotionally charged content often simplifies complex historical events, sometimes leading to the quick spread of highly selective or even biased versions of history. Therefore, while globalization offers transparency, it also empowers both those who seek to deconstruct and those who seek to amplify traditional patriotic sentiments.
Is it possible for a person to be patriotic without having a deep knowledge of their country's history?
It is certainly possible for a person to experience and express patriotism without having a detailed, academic knowledge of their country's history. Patriotism is fundamentally an emotional bond, often rooted in a feeling of belonging, love for the landscape, cultural practices, or a general sense of community. For many, this feeling is nurtured by contemporary experiences, like supporting a national sports team, enjoying the local cuisine, or appreciating the present-day political stability and opportunities. These everyday connections are often more immediate and emotionally potent than knowing the exact dates of historical events or political figures. However, patriotism based solely on present-day feelings or simplified symbols is often described as shallow or superficial. A deep, informed patriotism that can withstand scrutiny and recognize past injustices usually requires a critical engagement with one's nation's full, complex history.
Do you think national leaders should use historical stories to inspire people, or should they focus more on future goals?
I believe national leaders should strike a careful balance between utilizing historical stories and emphasizing future goals, as both are necessary for effective governance and inspiration. Historical stories provide essential context, identity, and unity, reminding people of shared origins and overcoming past struggles, which can be invaluable during times of crisis or division. Relying too heavily on the past, however, can lead to stagnation, preventing necessary change, or even fostering a sense of victimhood or nostalgia that isn't productive. Therefore, the primary focus must always be on future goals, outlining tangible plans for economic prosperity, technological advancement, and social justice. Leaders should use history not just to stir emotion, but to illustrate lessons learned and to underscore the foundational values that will propel the nation toward its future aspirations.
How does a nation's ability to critically examine its own history affect its international relations?
A nation's willingness and ability to critically examine its own history significantly impacts its international relations and standing on the global stage. When a country openly addresses its past mistakes, acknowledging periods of injustice, colonialism, or conflict, it demonstrates a degree of maturity, accountability, and ethical leadership. This critical self-reflection builds trust with neighboring states and the international community, making diplomatic engagement more sincere and cooperation easier. Conversely, a country that promotes an uncritical, purely celebratory, or revisionist view of its history often generates suspicion and antagonism, particularly with nations that were victims of its past actions. This can lead to ongoing political tensions, trade disputes, and difficulties in forming stable alliances. Ultimately, historical honesty is key to establishing a mature, forward-looking foreign policy built on respect rather than denial.